It all started as any other rainy day in KASESE district on 1st May 2013. This later turned out sour and disastrous as several riverbanks burst out, causing severe damage to property and loss of lives. Kilembe had not experienced such a disaster for about 47 years.
Even water has reached in the hospital. We're still here praying to God that this water should not increase.
Unfortunately, the water has risen to very high levels, and all these retainer walls again have broken down, and now the water has again taken the course it had already created for itself.
The rivers Nyamwamba, Nyamgasani and Mubuku all flooded with roaring waters that eroded and swept villages. Bridges and roads were washed away, cutting off communication and causing panic. Many were caught unaware of such a mayhem.
The whole district woke up to find itself at the center of this nasty disaster. River Nyamgasani burst its banks. River Nyamamba, the same. River Mubuku, the same. It caught us completely unawares, this leadership and the general population.
It's apparent that the floods occurred without our prior knowledge, because we had not detected, nor had we had any community information to the effect that there was an unexpected flood.
A disaster like a flood, which comes without warning, was very difficult to handle, because people say that it had occurred around about 50 years ago. So nobody in that age bracket was able to really detect what could happen in the nearest future. So the thing just came abruptly, as you hear the word abruptly. And unfortunately enough, where the river was flowing had very serious weak points, including those ones of where the bridges were sited. So as a bridge would be swept away, then water would flow over the river bank. As it flows over the river bank, then it would go and meet people in their localities.
Mostly women were affected. Most of the women were from the gardens. They could not cross. Some had children. They could not cross with them. The children were also affected. And some of the children, in fact, they took long and like to get them, discover where they had gone, because it was during that day. Some people are not in their homes. Most of the children are alone at home. So many things were affected. The river took out some people's households. Some houses fell.
Over 25,000 people were displaced and 8 people died in the confusion. The situation was sad. Not even the increasing uproar of the waters could allow the communities along the river banks.
As we already saw the water levels rising, the water could be seen even right from very far. You can see within the river bed there was too much water. So when the staff ran to us, the staff told us water was getting into her house. And of course the first thing for me to do was to move out to the theater. I went and I put on a gumboot with an umbrella. I went to the nurses' quarters, where I reached up to the very house, the first house that was attacked by the water. By the time I reached, it was still at the level of the ankle, just above the foot. So it wasn't that very much. But at that time, it was very difficult for us to get warning signs, because that was our first time to experience such a disaster for the time we've been here, because we are told the most recent happened in the 1960s.
Humanitarian agencies worked tirelessly with government under the office of the Prime Minister and KASESE local government to evacuate the 195 patients from Kilembe Hospital and the resettlement of the affected communities.
The first thing we did was, of course, on reaching the nurses' quarters. The water levels were rising each and every time. I personally took part in evacuating the materials for the staff, their bedding materials, the blankets, whatever property belonged to them. We started lifting the properties to the hospital this side. We thought we were bringing it to a safer place, but actually at the end we were proved wrong, because the water came up to where we relocated their properties. So as we tried to do that, the water level kept on rising and rising and rising. So time came when it was at the level of the waist. So we couldn't go anymore. So what we had to do was to remain this side of the hospital.
They set up temporary camps, while others stayed with host families as Nyamwamba waters swept away wards, causing everybody to run in disarray.
It was overwhelming. So all of a sudden, I saw people moving around. They were running actually, but I didn't know that there was a danger. Till somebody came and alerted me when I was in that house which is remaining there, the Kawol. I was inside there. So by the time he came to tell me to come out that there was a danger, the river has burst its banks. I was just from the bathroom, I was bathing. So I ran inside. He told me, you come out, you run. I told him, let me go and put on first. I ran inside, I put on a skirt and a blouse on me. Then I carried out the baby, the child which was with me in the house. So we came out. By the time I came out with the baby, I could not cross the water. But still the gentleman came and helped me out of the water with a child.
We are very grateful to each and everyone who was there, because everyone tried to play his or her role, really. Imagine patients who were just operated, still sleeping under anesthesia, but to carry them from wherever they are to a safer place. The veranda of the shops became our ward, if I can say, because the patients were carried there, the cleaners, each and everyone took part to evacuate the patients, because on that day we had close to 195 patients.
Of course, during the process of evacuation, we actually faced a lot of challenges, because some of the patients had been operated upon, and therefore shifting them wasn't an easy task. And in the process, we lost some lives, and also some people developed complications, which we managed to handle, and we were able to have all of them actually cured. Unfortunately, we lost one or two of them.
So the challenges we had on that very day, the immediate one was there was an attack. It was sweeping those homes. It was sweeping institutional premises. People need to be evacuated. How do you organize logistics and associated resources?
Consequently, the situation of school children, staff at Kilembe mines, and the hospital was a challenge due to communication gaps. There was need to use people-centered approaches during emergency responses.
But of course, at that time, the means of communication was mainly just shouting to let the people leave the place. Shouting and letting the staff come out of the place. The very person that most people saw who was trapped on that tree, I personally carried his TV set, carried his bag and his mattress. So most people were able to respond to the call to leave the place, but then some people ended up being trapped. And that's why he ended up on the roof of the house and finally taken onto the tree as the house broke. So at the first time, mainly it was shouting to the people.
Actually, with the communities, we were mainly going through the community structures. Like if I'm going to a sub-county, I communicate through the sub-county chief and the community development officer. Then later they link us also to other lower levels like the parishes, the parish chiefs, and then lastly to the local council leaders like the LC1 chairperson, and in some other areas, VHTs, village health committees, who are also helping us. But also as Red Cross, we have our channels like the volunteers in charge of certain regions, and then later the volunteers also have lower level volunteers whom we would communicate through. But also at the same time, like when we communicate to the communities, of course the communities also have to be communicating back to us through the same channels.
That the community here in the district, they are not open enough to say what is happening. They tend to keep the information to themselves. And I don't know whether it is cultural, whether it has any social factors, but this is what I have observed as personally. So the communication is not smooth from community to government. And therefore, if it is not smooth from community to government, it becomes also a bit difficult for government to communicate, but it's because it's not able to detect. We don't have a system that detects that a disaster is likely to occur. We only see it when it has occurred. And certainly when it occurs, when you are not prepared, what happens now is rush. Irrational decision making, irrational actions taking place.
Yeah, of course, we had a series of meetings. We had the district disaster response committee, which was charged with using any avenues to disseminate this information. Then we have our district health office with its structures, the health inspectorate staff, the VHTs, the village health teams. All of them were actually brought on board. Of course, the other issue was the radio. We were able to get free airtime on our local FM radio stations, and involving the local leadership, we were able to sensitize these communities.
With people-centered approach to communication, communities will have input into the flood management system.
From the history of Kilembe Mines Limited, I was told the floods used to disturb the earlier years of establishment of the mine. And by then they had a siren which I can say is automated with a component of it attached under the bridge, such that when the water level rises and reaches that level, then the siren is set on and people know that the water levels are high. Yes, that's what used to happen in the early 50s and early 60s. So I think introducing such a system will be okay. Introducing such a system will be okay, so that it will not be humans to control it. It is something automatic, it is something programmed, yes, triggered. Once water level reaches that point, then the siren runs and people are let to know that the water levels are rising and anytime a flood may attack. But then, of course, there are other means that can be used. The local radio stations should be able to be used. Then also community members should be trained. Like the time when the disaster attacked the place, the district disaster committee had not undergone its training. They were not trained. So people did not have knowledge on how to respond to such a disaster. Everything was like gambling, if I can say, yes. But now this is the time when people should be trained. Even the locals, the communities should know the types of disasters that they're likely to experience wherever they stay, so that once the disaster strikes, then they'll know what type of measures to undertake.
Radios have been so much important because even before the flood, we had a project called the Semuliki Catchment Management Project that was supported by Worldwide Fund for Nature Conservation, that's WWF. We did a very serious job in communicating to people through radio, not knowing that really what we were communicating was going to happen. But because people were somehow adamant and they had not yet experienced such kind of situations, I don't know whether our radio had an impact. But now, after having this practical issue problem, they have now come to realize what we used to talk about. So radios have been very important, focused community meetings supported by our department, the Natural Resources Department, have been very much influential and instrumental. Then definitely the cultural institution.
After realizing gaps in communication for disaster management, KASESE District Disaster Committee, together with development partners, are implementing a communication plan for disaster management.
We are now awake that in the month of May, it's likely that we shall have a problem. And now we are even thinking of, people have started even talking of the October rains. So it means the community is now awake. But for that first attack, we were caught unaware. So we had no communication strategy, meaning that we are communicating zigzagly. We didn't have a document that we were following. But as the district health office, we now have the messages, but we are yet to put them into a communication strategy. Because a communication strategy is a document that has all the avenues and the strategies that you are meant to use. And you don't wait for the problem to occur, but you keep on picking items in that very document to pass to the community. So we are actually updating it. The draft copy is in place, but we need, of course, the inputs of the rest of the stakeholders so that it is complete.
The challenge remains on the side of the river, because even now there are hot spots where water can easily pass and destroy the hospital. And this is something that we need to take urgently because we don't want to repeat the blood scenario we had the other day.
As a way of mitigating the adverse effects of disaster, government needs to establish strong and proactive media campaigns which will address the following objectives: increase visibility of government programs and initiatives, work in partnership to achieve wide-ranging and inclusive solutions to the challenge of climate change, address emerging issues basing on information collected and also provide user-friendly information to those who need it, and sensitize the affected communities on safety measures and government plans to evacuate them.
To have like community-based structures which are well established. For example, if a disaster hits, it has hit a certain area, people in Kyarumba, at a community level, at a village level, do they have a committee in charge of disaster that would be able to communicate to another level, maybe at the parish level, and then the parish, the sub-county, and then to the district? Two, are they the community-based structures? Do they have some focal persons at other levels, like at the district, whom they know that in case of a disaster, I would be able to make a telephone call or send an SMS very fast to so, and this would respond, because like in the agencies that always respond, and as we have always seen, Red Cross is always number one. You see police coming in very fast, and maybe the district departments like the health, the engineering, and that kind of thing, the medical departments, ambulances. But is there any system at the local level, at the parish level, at the village level, that knows that if there is a disaster, I should communicate to the DPC and he is responsible and he immediately share the information with others? That kind of structure is still missing.
Go to the community. It is the community which knows the problem. They are the community members who know their problems, and they are the same people who can address them better, or maybe who can really show the solution to this problem. So as a community development worker, have feeling like those people need to be brought on board. We first meet them, we hear their views. They also participate in how we can mitigate those issues.
Agricultural practices, illegal human activities, especially agriculture, and they had done even an illegal irrigation scheme. So loosening of that soil of the riverbank to invite the water to your garden so that the canal irrigation can be carried out was also an issue of concern. Because whenever the river could have excess water, those were some of the points where still it would use to to get rid of the excess water. Now, when you also move along the river valleys we have now, we have lost the riparian vegetation that used to hold those river banks together. Riparian vegetation lost out of our human activities along those valleys. We have lost that kind of complex root system that binds the soil together. We have lost that woody kind of vegetation that would strengthen our banks. That's an issue. Another issue is, this one is natural. You know, we need to respect a river's natural hydrological systems. When a river floods, it means in its upstream areas, maybe rain has fallen, maybe out of these climate changes. So when a river floods, it's normal. It's a natural phenomenon for a river to flood. It's a natural phenomenon for a river to eroding its banks. It's natural. It's a natural phenomenon for a river to deposit its silt and boulders basing on the velocity characterized by the gradient. It's normal. But now, when you find that the river is depositing excessively, and it accumulates its deposits over a very long period of time, then you find that its valley will be filled by boulders and silt, and therefore will not be able to have its water continue in a specific direction. But it will instead find different channels, what we end up calling channel migration. The river will migrate, the channel will migrate, and with a valley that is sort of plate-like, flat-like, then water, whenever it floods, it will have to find different ways it takes to in the valleys whom we think can be so much affected, or if we are to bring an intervention, which people do we think can assist us, and then cultural institutions come in, these CBOs, NGOs come in, water user groups who had formed actually water user groups, they also come in. So if we are to communicate, we should actually emphasize on communicating to people who can cause an impact. After communicating to a group of people, they should be able to put in practice whatever you communicated. Yes.
So my recommendation would be that if we can empower the local government system, the structures, they give more information, they are readily acceptable than when a cow, when you see a person, when another DC talks. They think for us we are doing our proper government propaganda. But when it is the warning is sounded by the village chairperson, the community listen.
A number of initiatives have been executed, and government has put in place measures to curb down the situation. The Red Cross report identifies the most urgent humanitarian needs as essential household items, hygiene, and sanitation. KASESE district experiences heavy rains in the Rwenzori Mountains in the months of April, May, September, and October every year, and thereafter, some disastrous floods stream in the lowlands through the incised valleys and the vast Nyamwamba Valley. The periodic flash flooding is now taking a turn, with experts suspecting great climatic changes between the months of April to September. Now, government needs to strengthen the meteorological department to be able to detect and inform the community before such disasters strike.